Hello, so this is for the subject Church Financial Management, and our topic is Chapter 5 Compensation. Um, okay, so to begin, compensation would cover salaries and wages, either payment on a daily basis or weekly, sometimes every 2 weeks or monthly basis. So it would depend on the church how often they would like to pay off their workers or their employees. Okay. So with regards to type of employment, so we have contractual and regular employees. Normally, if someone is doing a job which is essential to the business or to the organization, meaning it cannot be, it has to be done. Okay, the work needs to be done. Otherwise, the operation would be disrupted. Okay, so in such a case, the employee doing the work um, would be considered a regular employee. Okay, meaning they have to do their work regularly to support the operations of the organization. Okay, and then we have the so-called contractual employees, wherein they're only meant to do, some extra work that the regular employees are not able to do, or maybe there's a specific activity or um, program that would need additional people to support it, so they would get extra people. So it would only be a contractual employment. Okay, but of course, real life scenario, or in reality, sometimes, for the most part, certain for profit organizations are exploiting the what do you call it the classification of their employees, because regular employees need to be given the mandatory benefits, whereas um, and the contractual employees are normally not given the same benefits. But anyway, there would be certain cases lodged against previous employers or certain business organizations for um, such a situation, but we won't be tackling majority of that. Um, for church organizations, non-profit, so it's a matter of what do you call it, communicating properly with the worker or with the employee how it's going to work, whether they would be put on contractual or regular employment. Okay, and then that would dictate what kind of compensation they would be getting. Okay, even though of course churches are non-profit organizations, they still need to abide uh, by the laws and regulations being implemented in the uh, respective countries they are operating. Okay, so here in the Philippines, churches, non-profit organizations, still need to register. They would need to get business permits, SEC registration, and then they would have to submit reportorial requirements to, let's say, the BIR, the SEC, and then the auxiliary regulatory agencies. We have the SSS, PhilHealth, Pag-ibig. Sometimes DOLE would also require some reports. Um, DOLE, the Department of Labor and Employment. Sometimes they would check whether a business is indeed employing workers, and whether such workers are receiving reasonable compensation. Okay. So in terms of compensation, again, we have salaries and wages, and then the other benefits. Um, they need to follow the minimum wage being implemented. So, for example, currently here in our city, The minimum wage is 373 per day. I'm not sure if it's been updated recently, but so far no updates, right? 373 per day. And again, it would depend on the category of the business. Okay. Um, 373 per day. And then, of course, other than the minimum wage, the employers are also required to contribute for the mandatory uh, benefits, the SSS contribution, PhilHealth, and then the pag-ibig. Okay? SSS is for employees of private companies. It would go for the retirement benefits of the workers or of the employees. So when they retire at the age of 55 or 60 or 65, they would be able to avail or get the benefits from the SSS. Okay. And then PhilHealth is a type of health insurance which is mandatory to all Filipinos. So in case of medical needs, case of sickness, hospitalization. So um, the worker and their beneficiaries would not suffer much problem about where to get the money to pay off their hospitalization. So there is the field health. And then pag-ibig or Home Development Mutual Fund, HDMF, is a mandatory savings program implemented by the government for all workers. Um, Before it was implemented, there was it was seen that many Filipinos are unable to maintain savings with the banks or with the financial institution. So they created HDMF for that purpose. And the secondary one, in a way, it's still their primary purpose, which is to provide a means for the members to borrow money to build their homes or to acquire houses, house and lot, okay, or to renovate their current homes, something like that. Okay, so that's why it's called Home Development Mutual Fund. But in short, it's called Pag-ibig. I think it stands for something. Ikaw, bangko, industriya at gobyerno, I think, yung pag-ibig. Okay. Anyway, so let's go over the different types of compensation that workers may receive. So normally they are, received in cash or in the form of money. It's normally computed based on the minimum wage or the daily rate of the employee. So let's say it's 373 per day, and then you have to compute how many days in a week the worker uh, what do you call it delivered their services or did their job. So just compute that, and then you deduct the mandatory contributions, employee share. Okay, you have the employee share, which is deducted from their um, gross pay, and then you have the employer share, which is an additional cost to the company. Okay, and then with regards to payroll, the employer may also deduct, let's say, loans from SSS and Pag-ibig, because they do offer types of loans to their members, which the employees or church members may avail. So in that sense, they have to pay off the loans, which can be deducted from their gross pay, and then the employer would remit it to the respective agency. Okay, and then other than that, there might also be advances of some sort, or borrowings from the organization. So that could be deducted from the salary to ensure repayment of those borrowings. Okay. So other than the gross pay, the daily rate multiplied by the number of days that they work in a payroll period. So the management may also offer other types of compensation, such as the following. So we have here personage, allowing a clergy staff member to live in a home provided by the church. So some sort of dormitory or living arrangement. Okay, it's a non-cash benefit, but it's not in the form of cash, but it's a benefit because instead of renting a place, so the church would provide the place for them to live in. Okay, and then you have your parsonage. Sorry, it's parsonage allowance, providing a cash allowance to a clergy staff member who lives in a parsonage to help cover incidental costs, utilities, maintenance, etc., or the rent itself. Okay, I'm not sure how to read that, but I would read that as parsonage. Others may read it as parsonage or whatever. Clergy housing allowance, or designating a portion of a clergy staff member's wages as housing allowance to cover the cost of housing. Okay, so maybe the living arrangement is not exactly free, but the church may subsidize a portion of it. So let's say if the rent is 5,000 a month, the church can cover 3,000, and then the 2,000 would have to be uh, paid by the employee himself. Okay. Another example, church provided home for non-clergy staff. So allowing a non-clergy staff member to live in a home provided by the church. Okay. So it's not only for the church leaders. It could also be for any of the church workers. Group health insurance, only if the church management sees the benefit of it, so they can also uh, register in a group health insurance. Okay, so here in the Philippines we do have PhilHealth already, which is a mandatory government contribution, but of course the benefits have limits. So let's say for a particular illness, you can only be subsidized for a certain amount. So if your hospital bill is over that amount, then you would have to pay the balance. Okay, but if you have a private health insurance, then that will also help in covering the additional cost or the excess cost in the hospital bill. Okay, medical expense reimbursement. So in case someone in case an employee or a church worker experiences an illness or sickness, and they would have to spend a lot of money on hospitalization, hospital bills. So um, there might be medical expense reimbursement from the church. Okay, but again, these things would need to be included in the policy of the church or in their manual, and it has to be explicitly mentioned that the church would be providing this type of benefit. Or it might not be in the policy or manual, but there might be a certain either announcement or notice that the church would be giving it, okay, would be providing it to its employees. These are what they call it, discretionary benefits. These are not mandatory, so the church management may choose not to give this. Okay, so in any case, if it's not decided by the church management to give out, then an employee would not be able to, demand for these types of benefits if the management did not choose to. Okay, so it's a discretion by the management. If they did decide to give this out, then the employees may avail. But sometimes the management would provide conditions. So let's say for you to be given a certain benefit, you have to be working for the organization for at least 1 year, or for at least 3 years. Okay, or let's say 5 years. So it could be a benefit given in proportion to their length of service. And then what else? It's also possible to give them to new hires, by the church, or as long as you're an employee, regardless of the length of service. So the conditions, the terms and conditions would be all decided by the church management. Okay. Then you have your retirement plans. The mandatory would be the SSS. Okay, but aside from the SSS, the church may give out a separate retirement benefit for the workers. Okay, then you have group life insurance. This one is health, and then the second one is life insurance. So in case of death of a worker, so they could claim benefits from the insurance company to give out to their loved ones or family. Okay, then we have short-term disability insurance. SSS do give out disability benefits as well as unemployment benefits, but there are conditions. Okay, I think um, number of years working or number of contributions paid, and then you have to submit documents to prove that you are indeed suffering a disability. Currently, it could be permanent or it could be a temporary disability, and then they would have to evaluate your papers, your documents before they decide how much to give you as a disability benefit. And then we have for the unemployment. For the unemployment, essentially, it's just some sort of allowance for you to transition from being laid off from your previous job, and then allows you a certain amount of money to use to look for another job. Okay, so I think unemployment benefits is only good for 2 months or 6 months. I'm not sure. I think 2 months is the longest. They don't. The government does not want you to remain unemployed for too long. Okay, this cat is go away muna. Ay, sorry. Okay, I think this is not what. Okay, group long term disability insurance. Um, I'm not sure if here in the Philippines we do have disability insurance as provided by private corporations or insurance companies, but SSS do give out a certain amount, but individual for each members, okay, who are paying up contributions. For health insurance or long-term care, I think this would fall under permanent disability benefit by the SSS. And then you have your dependent care. Feel health, aside from the member or the worker itself, himself, the beneficiaries, the dependents, either their children or their spouse or their parents are considered dependents. Okay, so if any of the dependents also became sick, hospitalized, then they're also covered by Feel Health. Okay, I'm not sure about the other countries, but that's the situation in the Philippines. So when you go back, you might want to check the different types of mandatory benefits, being implemented in your respective countries. Use of church-owned vehicles. So let's say the staff member or church worker is allowed to use a certain vehicle which is owned by the church. Okay? Payment of expenses for church business activity. So this is, is considered expense of the church. So if the worker pays it off out of his own expense for the meantime, since could possible he hasn't gotten the allowance from the church yet for that specific activity, so it's possible that they do pay it off from their own pockets first and then reimburse them later on from the church. Okay, then we have payment for spouse or companion travel. What do you call it? I'm not sure, but let's say um a church worker was invited to another church for some activities, but let's make it official business travel. So in such a case, it's considered church expense. So there could be an allowance for the travel, for their meals, something like that. And then continuing education, so attending seminars or workshops for them to enhance their knowledge. If they wanted to attend extra education courses, so it's possible that the church would cover the expenses for that. Tuition discounts in a church operated school. So let's say a church has a counterpart, a school like GBC and BBBC. So it's possible that the workers of GBC are given employee discounts if their children are enrolled in the Bible school. So they would get a certain amount for tuition discounts. If given by the church management. Okay, expense allowances or discretionary funds. Let's say examples: books and research, travel, automobile. Let's say load or internet allowance, something like that. Okay, but again, majority of these are discretionary on the part of the church management. If the church decides to give them, then that's good. But if not, then they cannot be compelled to, because this is not not mandatory. Okay, the only benefits that the church needs to give out are in necessary. They need to are the mandatory benefits. Okay. And then I'm going to pause here before we discuss the different types of compensation philosophy. Okay, it's been 20 minutes already, so pause here and then next video.